guys? It's Erica with Not Your Average EDC, and I have 2 points that I want to make today in a video real quick. I have been getting tons of messages about blade centering and blade steel, so I figured I would just make a quick video discussing that, and hopefully the people that were messaging me are watching, and this will help answer some questions. By the way, I'm super grateful that you guys send me so many DMs and trust me and my knowledge to help you. That's very humbling. I really like that, and I appreciate all of you guys because I use a lot of YouTube for information, so it's cool that the community can learn from each other and stuff, but I'm super grateful that so many people message me for my knowledge. That feels very good. So let's talk about blade centering first. Many messages lately about blade centering on Benchmade knives. People are having issues, okay? So that has always been an issue with Benchmade. It seems like it's going away, but a lot of people seem to have blade centering issues, and they say that they've tried the tips and tricks and it's still not working. So let's start from the top to the bottom real quick with the knife and go over all the things that could go wrong, that could make your knife not centered. And just pay close attention. You can check on your own knife, and if all else fails, it'll probably be the final thing that I mention. So you have a knife. It's not centered. First, take the knife apart and clean it, please. That really can help. If you take it apart and you clean it and you put it back together and it's still not centered, make sure your pivot screw is all the way down. Benchmade, when they put their knives together, uses Loctite, and what can happen is when you put your pivot screw back in, you may think that the screw is in all the way, and it's not. You have hit a little bit of Loctite, and you are thinking, yep, okay, the pivot's in, and then you look, ooh, doesn't look good. It's not centered, something must be wrong. Make sure that you tighten the pivot down all the way, bring the knife completely together, and then back off your pivot and work with the action. Because sometimes you get caught on that Loctite and it feels like you've snugged it up and you really haven't. And that has happened to me before, where I hit Loctite on the screw. I thought it was all good, and then I looked, it wasn't centered. I went back and I was able to do another turn and a half probably. But I had hit the Loctite. I thought that the pivot screw was in all the way, and it wasn't. So make sure you bring the knife completely together, and then back your pivot off and adjust and see if that helps. Second thing, washers. Your washers, if you have used your knife, have worn a specific way. When you take the washers off with disassembly, try to put them back on the way that they were before. Make sure that the smooth side, or the side that has been wearing in, you will see the circles. Make sure that your wear side is with the blade, how it was, how it has worn in. Don't try to switch them around or anything if it was looking good before. If it didn't look good before and it was off center, then maybe you should try moving your washers around. Sometimes it helps. At times when you are trying to center the blade, sometimes it helps to move the blade in the opposite direction while you're tightening the pivot, and then tighten it and let go and see if that helps. These are all tips and tricks that you can find on YouTube and online and such. But if all else fails, if you have tried all of those things and your knife still isn't looking centered, I think you should examine what you are calling centered. When I first came into the community, I would look at probably the last inch of the blade, okay? And if it wasn't looking like it was in the center of the knife, I thought the knife wasn't centered. Now, sometimes that's the case, but I have learned over the years to look at the whole blade. Look at the whole blade and really look at what is off center. If the entire blade is bent like that, the whole blade, then yes, your knife is not centered and there's a problem, and you can try those tips from earlier to fix it. If the whole blade is like that, that's not good. If your blade looks centered throughout most, and you have the same spatial gap between your top scale and your bottom scale with the blade, and it looks even, but then the last little bit doesn't look even, check your grind lines. Benchmade is notorious for poor grind lines, not only on their edge bevels, but the actual grind lines that sculpt the knife can be extremely uneven. I have a D2 Tanto that is so uneven. I've measured the grind lines on each side. They're so far off. I'm not even sure how it got out of there. And it actually does make the knife look off center. So when I have my D2 Tanto blade closed, the whole blade is center until you get to where they really put those cool grind lines on to make that Tanto tip, and it is like off. It looks like the last inch of the blade is like way over like that. And it's really not. The blade is centered and the grind lines are just terribly, terribly done. So open your knife up, maybe measure your grind lines near the end, make sure they're even and such, because if they're not, it's basically tricking your eyes to think that your knife is really off center and that you've tried everything and it's just not working properly. And it really could just be the blade itself was ground very poorly, and you're only looking at the tip, because like in photos on Instagram when people are selling knives and such, they take a photo like this to prove that it's centered. So we just immediately think, oh, I'm looking at that final inch and tip of the blade, and if it's off centered, that means the whole blade is off center. Don't do that. Don't do that. It really could just be the grind lines making it look all wonky, but the rest of the blade is actually in line. And my Tanto blade is so poorly ground that when I go to open it, the very tip rubs on the scales. That's how poorly done it was. I just switched it to a different set of scales. It doesn't do that as much, but it really can happen where it's tricking your mind to think that your knife is not built properly, when realistically somebody just was grinding those final grind lines and it just didn't come out as it should have, and they're off, and it makes the whole thing look off. So please check that. Please check your knives, check your grind lines. Second thing is blade steel. Numerous people have messaged me with concerns in regard to S30V from, say, Spyderco or Benchmade, comparing it to Chris Reeve S35 or S45 VN, and people are worried because the S35 or S45 is not toothy like the S30V. And I've made videos about it before, but I'll just reiterate, they're very different steels from different companies with different heat treats, and I have obviously tested Benchmade's S30V and Chris Reeve S35, and the only way that I could get the S35 to have any type of bite was to listen to Chef Kalari, Steve, Super Steel Steve. He advised that I brought the DPS to 15, so degrees per side, 15. That's very thin, and that's the only way that I could get my CRK in S35 to have any type of bite at all. But that steel is, it's very smooth. It's not super toothy. So for the people that are messaging me saying, I'm sharpening my S35 VN the same way as my S30V, the S30V is like a great working steel. It's toothy, it's got bite, and the S35 is very smooth and soft. You may not be doing anything wrong. It's just a different steel. It's not as toothy, and that's why I didn't prefer it for my work EDC. I've made videos about that. I just don't prefer Chris Reeve knives at this moment for my work EDC because they don't have enough grit to them unless I do the 15 degrees per side, which does help. But the S45 is a little bit better. It held an edge better for sure. I did my testing with that too. It definitely was very different. However, in the end, I still decided that it wasn't toothy enough for me, and I really do enjoy using S30V from Benchmade and 154 CM from Emerson. I really enjoy those for work blades as opposed to the Chris Reeve knives. But anyway, like I said in the beginning of the video, the fact that you guys use me as a tool source and a knowledge source for knives, that really does mean a lot to me. So I'll just keep making these videos that are in regard to general questions that I get through Instagram, and hopefully we can just kind of pick away at those and find some clarity, because I really don't think a lot of people look at the grind lines on their knives, and tons of people think that their Benchmade knives are off center when they just weren't ground very well, and it happens. It's just what happens with production knives like that. So have a great day, guys. Hope you're all doing well, and please use your shit.